Imagine telling Winston Churchill that one day an invaded nation would remain connected not because its telephone exchanges survived, but because thousands of satellites kept moving above it. They would carry no bombs. They would destroy no tanks. Yet commanders would use them to issue orders. Drone teams would use them to transmit images. Hospitals, government offices, and emergency crews would use them to remain online while infrastructure below was being attacked. Churchill would probably not begin by asking how fast the internet was. He would ask who controlled it. He would ask whether the enemy could silence it. And he would ask what happened to a nation when it disappeared. Because in modern war, the first system to collapse may not be an air force or an armoured brigade. It may be the nervous system that tells every other system where to move, what to defend, and when to strike. This is why Starlink matters. Not because satellite internet can win a war by itself. It cannot. But because the ability to communicate is becoming almost inseparable from the ability to fight. War has always been a contest of organised information. An army may possess weapons, fuel, and trained soldiers. But if its headquarters cannot reach its units, if reconnaissance cannot report what it sees, and if supply officers do not know where ammunition is needed, that army begins to fragment. Firepower destroys. Communication concentrates firepower at the moment it is required. For centuries, commanders tried to solve the same problem with different tools: flags at sea, mounted couriers on land, signal lamps, telegraph lines, and radio. Each innovation reduced the distance between a decision and an action. Each also created a new vulnerability. Couriers could be captured, wires could be cut, radio traffic could be intercepted, headquarters could be located and attacked. The technology changed. The strategic problem did not. Britain confronted that problem in its most dangerous form in 1940. The Luftwaffe could approach across the Channel in large formations. Britain did not have enough fighters, pilots, or fuel to keep aircraft circling over every possible target. If fighter command reacted too late, German bombers would reach British cities and airfields. If it launched too early or sent fighters to the wrong place, scarce aircraft would waste fuel chasing empty sky. Britain therefore needed something more valuable than another squadron. It needed warning. Along the coast stood the towers of Chain Home, Britain's early warning radar network. They could detect approaching formations while those aircraft were still over the sea. But radar alone did not win the Battle of Britain. A signal on a screen was useless unless it could be verified, organised, and turned into an order. Radar reports flowed into a larger command and control structure known as the Dowding system. Information from Chain Home was combined with reports from the Royal Observer Corps. It was assessed in filter rooms, displayed on operations maps, sent through telephone networks, and used by sector controllers to direct fighter squadrons toward incoming raids. The decisive invention was not merely the radar tower. It was the network connecting the tower to the pilot. This distinction matters because history is often simplified until technology begins to look like magic. Radar did not make Britain invulnerable. It had limitations. Low-flying aircraft were harder to detect. Reports could be incomplete. Human judgment remained essential. Pilots still had to take off, find the enemy, and fight. Nor was radar Churchill's personal invention. Much of the system had been developed before he became Prime Minister, through the work of scientists, engineers, Air Ministry officials, Hugh Dowding, and thousands of operators. But Churchill inherited more than a collection of machines. He inherited a new way of organising national defence. He understood that scientific knowledge became strategically decisive only when government, industry, intelligence, and armed force were connected. The same principle appeared in another secret battle. At Bletchley Park, British codebreakers worked to penetrate encrypted German communications. From 1941, Churchill received daily intelligence reporting from Bletchley, including copies of particularly important messages. Ultra-intelligence did not provide perfect knowledge. Messages could be missed, decoded too late, or deliberately misleading. Even accurate intelligence could not always be used immediately, because acting too obviously might reveal that German communications had been compromised. Once again, Information was powerful only when placed inside a disciplined system of judgment. The Battle of the Atlantic demonstrated this with brutal clarity. Britain depended on ships carrying food, fuel, weapons and raw materials across an ocean hunted by German U-boats. The survival of those convoys did not rest on one miracle technology. It depended on routing, escorts, radar, high-frequency direction finding, air cover, intelligence, shipbuilding and coordination across thousands of kilometers. The ocean was not defended by a single weapon. It was defended by a network. That is the bridge from Churchill's world to ours. In the 20th century, Britain built networks across coastlines and oceans. In the 21st, those networks are extending into orbit. A fiber optic cable can carry an extraordinary amount of data, but it must pass through physical territory. A mobile tower has the same limitation. Its location is known. Its power supply can be disrupted. Its connection to the wider network can be cut. Satellite communication can bypass some of that damaged terrain. Traditional communication satellites often operate in geostationary orbit, roughly 36,000 kilometers above Earth. From that altitude, a satellite can cover an enormous area, but the great distance adds delay and concentrates service in a relatively small number of expensive platforms. Starlink uses a different architecture. Its satellites operate much closer to Earth in low Earth orbit. Because each satellite moves rapidly across the sky, a user terminal must shift its connection from one satellite to the next. Instead of relying on a few distant platforms, the system distributes capacity across a vast moving constellation. As of March 31, 2026, SpaceX reported approximately 9,600 Starlink broadband and mobile satellites in low Earth orbit. The company also reported median consumer latency of about 25 milliseconds. The important point is not the commercial speed claim. It is the scale of the architecture. The old model resembles a small number of powerful fortresses. The new model resembles a swarm of relays. Destroying or disabling one satellite does not automatically destroy the network because other satellites continue to pass overhead. But distributed does not mean indestructible. A Starlink terminal still requires electrical power and a usable view of the sky. Its signal can be jammed. Its location may be detected. Hardware can be destroyed. Software can fail. Ground gateways, spectrum access, account authorization and network management all remain part of the system. Starlink is resilient because it has many moving parts. It is also vulnerable because every network depends on more than what can be seen in orbit. Ukraine became the first large-scale demonstration of what this architecture could mean during a major war. The warning came at the very beginning. About 1 hour before Russia launched its full-scale invasion on February 24, 2022, a cyberattack struck Viasat's Ka-sat network. The disruption affected communications in Ukraine and spread to users in several European Union countries. The attack was not directed at Starlink, but it exposed a central truth of modern conflict. Communications infrastructure is no longer background equipment. It is an opening target. Russia also attacked Ukrainian energy and telecommunications infrastructure with missiles, drones, cyber operations, and electronic warfare. Yet Ukraine's communication system did not simply disappear. Mobile operators repaired damaged sites. Engineers rerouted traffic. Fiber networks, radio, cellular service, and other satellite systems continued to carry part of the load. Then Starlink added another layer. On February 26, 2022, 2 days after the invasion began, Starlink service was activated in Ukraine and additional terminals were sent to the country. Early cooperation between USAID and SpaceX supplied 5,175 terminals to support civilian communications and critical services. Further deliveries were financed or provided by SpaceX, the United States, Poland, and other European partners. By late 2025, Ukrainian officials said more than 50,000 terminals were operating in the country. That number matters because a terminal is not a command center or a weapons system. It is a portable doorway into a much larger network. Placed near a hospital, It can reconnect doctors and administrators after local infrastructure fails. Placed near an emergency centre, it can help officials coordinate rescue teams. Placed at a damaged energy facility, it can allow engineers to exchange information while restoring power. Placed at a military command post, it can carry maps, reports, orders and live imagery between units that might otherwise be isolated. The terminal does not make the decision. It keeps the people who make decisions connected. On the battlefield, Ukrainian forces have used Starlink for command communications and for some drone operations. High bandwidth links can transmit reconnaissance video, update digital maps, and connect teams separated by terrain or damaged infrastructure. Analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies have described how Starlink helped Ukrainian forces maintain links to drone operations despite Russian attempts to degrade communications. But the qualification is essential. Not every Ukrainian drone uses Starlink. Many tactical drones depend on direct radio links or other communication systems. Starlink does not replace GPS, military radio, intelligence, logistics, or trained personnel. It does not aim every weapon, and it certainly does not make conventional forces obsolete. It is one layer in a larger communications ecosystem. That is precisely why the comparison with radar is useful. In 1940, operators watched plots move across a table and passed instructions through telephone lines to fighter stations. In Ukraine, commanders can watch icons move across a digital map while video arrives from an unmanned aircraft and instructions travel through terrestrial and space-based networks. The tools are radically different. The strategic function is familiar. Both systems reduce the time between seeing danger and responding to it. And in war, time is often the resource that cannot be replaced. If reconnaissance identifies an enemy position but the report arrives 30 minutes late, the target may already be gone. If a unit requests ammunition but logistics cannot confirm its location, a defensive line may fail. If emergency crews cannot learn which substation has been hit, a city may remain without power longer than necessary. Connectivity preserves tempo. It allows a military, and increasingly an entire society, to continue making decisions under attack. This is what makes Ukraine's experience historically important. Starlink did not merely provide internet access behind the front. It demonstrated how commercial infrastructure could become part of national resistance almost overnight. But it also revealed the danger of dependence. Russian electronic warfare has repeatedly attempted to interfere with satellite and drone communications. Starlink has required technical updates and operational adaptation. In July 2025, a global Starlink software outage disrupted service for roughly 2.5 hours and affected Ukrainian military communications along the front. The satellites had not been shot down. The terminals had not all been jammed. A failure inside the network was enough to produce a battlefield consequence. This is the paradox that Churchill would have recognized. The more indispensable a technology becomes, the more dangerous its absence becomes. A serious strategist would therefore not treat Starlink as a miracle or a permanent guarantee. The real questions would be harder. Where are the backups? Can military units shift between satellite, radio, cellular and fibre networks? Who has the legal authority to change coverage? What happens if commercial policy conflicts with national strategy? And should infrastructure essential to the survival of a state ever depend too heavily on one provider? These questions do not diminish Starlink's importance, they reveal it. Churchill's generation learned that radar was valuable not because a machine could see across the channel, but because an entire country had been organised to act on what that machine detected. Our generation is learning the same lesson on a far larger scale. Thousands of satellites can carry information across borders, battlefields and broken infrastructure. But their true strategic value depends on the systems beneath them. Power, terminals, software, contracts, trained operators, alternative networks and political control. Starlink is not the weapon that replaces every other weapon. It is part of the invisible structure that allows modern weapons, institutions and people to operate together. And that may be the more profound revolution. History rarely rewards the strongest army. It rewards the army that sees, communicates, and adapts faster. The battle for space may not begin with an explosion. It may begin with a screen going dark. A drone loses its data link. A ship can no longer confirm its position. A missile warning center receives information too late. A commander discovers that units separated by hundreds of kilometers can no longer share the same picture of the battlefield. Nothing has been destroyed on the ground, yet the force below has begun to lose its ability to act as one. This is why low Earth orbit is becoming one of the most important strategic environments of the 21st century. The phrase control of space can be misleading. No nation owns orbit, and no military can permanently command every altitude above the planet. In practical terms, control means something narrower and more important: the ability to keep using your own space systems while preventing an enemy from confidently disrupting them. It means access under pressure. For Churchill's generation, the equivalent was the sea. Britain's survival depended on maritime routes connecting the island to food, fuel, soldiers and industry across the world. A map of the Atlantic was therefore not merely geography, it was a map of national survival. Today, many of the most important routes cannot be seen on an ordinary map. They run between satellites, ground stations, aircraft, ships, command posts, mobile terminals and data centers. The cargo moving along them is information. Modern armed forces rely on space for secure communications, navigation, weather forecasting, intelligence, missile warning and precise timing. Banking networks, electrical grids and telecommunication systems also depend on signals or services connected to space. The result is a new form of strategic geography. Launch sites resemble ports. Orbital planes resemble shipping lanes. Ground stations act as terminals connecting space to the infrastructure below. Radio spectrum becomes contested territory, and satellites become both instruments of power and objects requiring protection. A Churchillian strategist would recognize the pattern immediately. The geography has changed, the dependence has not. For decades, military space power was built around a relatively small number of extraordinarily capable satellites. Some operated in geostationary orbit, where a single platform could watch or communicate across an enormous region. These satellites offered exceptional performance, but they were expensive, slow to replace, and potentially attractive targets. Low Earth orbit introduces a different logic. Instead of placing every capability inside a few large platforms, a state can distribute communications and sensors across dozens, hundreds, or eventually thousands of smaller satellites. If one fails, others may continue the mission. If a launch is lost, the entire architecture does not disappear. New spacecraft can be manufactured and added more frequently. The military lesson resembles the commercial lesson demonstrated by Starlink. Do not rely only on a fortress. Build a network capable of losing individual parts without losing its purpose. The United States is turning that principle into military infrastructure. The US Space Development Agency is building the proliferated warfighter space architecture, a layered network of satellites in low Earth orbit. Its transport layer is intended to provide resilient, low-latency military communications. Its tracking layer uses infrared sensors to detect and follow advanced missile threats, including hypersonic systems. By July 2026, more than 60 Tranche 1 data transport satellites have been placed in orbit. The complete Tranche 1 design calls for 154 operational spacecraft, 126 for data transport, and 28 for missile tracking. This is not Starlink. It is a government military architecture with different missions, security requirements, and command authorities. But the strategic idea is related. Data should not depend on one path. Sensors should communicate with other sensors. Information collected in orbit should reach ships, aircraft, and ground forces with as little delay as possible. One satellite is an asset. A connected constellation becomes an operating system for military power. Consider missile warning. Traditional ground radar is constrained by geography and the curvature of the Earth. Space-based infrared sensors can detect the heat of a launch and observe threats across much wider areas. But detection alone is not enough. The warning must be processed, identified, and delivered rapidly to the forces that may need to respond. The new American architecture attempts to connect that entire chain: sensing, tracking, communication, and decision. This does not make missile defense certain. Hypersonic and maneuvering weapons remain extremely difficult targets. A satellite can provide warning without guaranteeing interception, but even a few additional minutes or seconds can change what is possible. This is the same principle that made radar strategically valuable in 1940. Information creates time. Time creates options. The United States currently possesses a major advantage because it can combine government systems with a powerful commercial space industry. SpaceX provides launch capacity and the world's largest commercial satellite network. Other companies contribute imagery, communications, analytics, manufacturing, and launch services. Yet dependence on commercial strength also creates concentration risk. If too much launch capacity, too much connectivity, or too many specialized services depend on a small number of companies, commercial success can become a national vulnerability. That tension is now shaping policy far beyond Washington. China has watched the war in Ukraine closely. Chinese military researchers have studied how proliferated low Earth orbit networks can support communications, reconnaissance, and military resilience. Beijing is also developing its own large constellations, including the state-backed SatNet system, also known as Guowang, and the G60 or Qianfan project. Their announced ambitions extend into many thousands of satellites. The gap with Starlink remains considerable, but China is building manufacturing plants, expanding launch infrastructure, and working to develop reusable rockets capable of increasing launch frequency. According to an April 2026 US Space Force assessment, China had placed 154 SatNet communication satellites and 108 G60 satellites in low Earth orbit by mid-February. The same assessment stated that China operated more than 500 satellites capable of supporting intelligence, surveillance, or reconnaissance. Those figures come from an American military assessment and should be understood as such. But the direction is unmistakable. China does not see low Earth orbit as a luxury market. It sees it as part of national power. The civilian applications are enormous: broadband access, transportation, agriculture, disaster response, and future mobile networks. The same infrastructure can also carry military communications, move intelligence, and improve coordination across great distances. This dual use is what makes the new space competition so difficult to govern. A satellite may connect a remote village in peacetime and support military data during a crisis. The launch vehicle that deploys commercial communication satellites may also deploy national security payloads. A private company may serve consumers, governments, and armed forces through different divisions of the same industrial system. The boundary between civilian and military infrastructure is becoming less visible. Europe has reached its own conclusion. The war in Ukraine demonstrated both the value of commercial satellite services and the danger of strategic dependence. Europe possesses advanced launch companies, satellite manufacturers, navigation systems, and established operators. But it does not yet possess a direct equivalent to Starlink at the same scale. The European Union's answer is IRIS-2, a planned multi-orbit network of more than 290 satellites and associated ground infrastructure. It is intended to provide secure government connectivity while also supporting commercial services, with governmental service expected by 2030. Europe is not simply attempting to copy Starlink. It is attempting to guarantee access to communications that remain trusted, resilient, and under European authority. That word, authority, is crucial. Military communications are not only about bandwidth, they are about assurance. A government must know who can access the network, who can change its coverage, how data is protected, and whether service will remain available during a political crisis. This is why NATO recognizes space as an operational domain alongside land, sea, air, and cyberspace. The alliance depends on space-based support for communications, navigation, and intelligence. It is also exploring systems that combine national, multinational, and commercial capabilities rather than relying on a single source. Resilience does not come from possessing one perfect network. It comes from having several imperfect networks capable of supporting one another. The need becomes clearer when drones enter the picture. A drone by itself is an aircraft with sensors, software, and perhaps a weapon. Its strategic value expands when it becomes part of a wider information system. It can send video to an analyst. The analyst can compare that image with satellite intelligence. A commander can send coordinates to another unit. A logistics team can redirect supplies. Another drone can be launched to confirm the result. Connectivity turns separate machines into a coordinated force. But it also creates a dependency. Break the data link, corrupt the coordinates, or delay the information, and a sophisticated drone may become blind, lost, or irrelevant. This is why electronic warfare has become so important. An opponent does not always need to destroy a satellite. It may be cheaper and less escalatory to interfere with the signal reaching the user. Jamming can overwhelm communications or navigation frequencies. Spoofing can feed a receiver false location data. Cyberattacks can target software, ground infrastructure, or user equipment. The attack may be temporary. Its effect may still be decisive. Conflict zones in Ukraine and the Middle East have already experienced widespread interference with satellite navigation signals. Civil aviation and maritime traffic can also be affected when electronic warfare spills beyond the intended battlefield. Space warfare therefore does not remain in space. Its consequences arrive in cockpits, vehicles, phones, power stations, and command posts on Earth. At the more destructive end of the spectrum are anti-satellite weapons. In 2007, China used a direct ascent weapon to destroy one of its own weather satellites. The test created more than 3,000 pieces of trackable debris. According to a later US assessment, roughly 2,700 pieces were still in orbit 16 years afterward. In 2021, Russia destroyed one of its own satellites in another anti-satellite test, generating more than 1,500 pieces of trackable debris. Astronauts and cosmonauts aboard the International Space Station were instructed to shelter temporarily because of the danger. These tests reveal the strange reality of orbital conflict. Destroying one enemy satellite may create thousands of uncontrolled projectiles moving at extraordinary speed. Those fragments do not recognize national flags. They can threaten military, commercial, scientific, and civilian spacecraft belonging to many countries, including the attacker. On Earth, a destroyed bridge falls into the river below. In orbit, the fragments may circle the planet for years. This makes kinetic attacks dangerous, unpredictable, and politically escalatory. It also encourages the development of less visible methods. Cyber intrusion, electronic interference, dazzling optical sensors, maneuvering spacecraft close to other satellites, and attacks against ground facilities. The most important battle may therefore be a contest of degradation rather than destruction. Can a network continue operating while some signals are jammed? Can users switch between different providers and different orbits? Can a satellite update its software after a new threat appears? Can damaged capacity be replaced quickly? Can commanders distinguish an enemy attack from a technical malfunction? That final question may be the most dangerous. If a military satellite suddenly fails during a crisis, leaders must decide whether the cause was mechanical, accidental, cyber, or deliberate. Their answer could determine whether the crisis remains contained or expands into a wider conflict. Space compresses distance. It can also compress decision time. This is why the emerging competition cannot be measured only by counting satellites. Numbers matter, but architecture matters more. A country also needs launch capacity, manufacturing, software, spectrum access, secure ground stations, trained personnel, cyber defense, and allies capable of sharing information. Starlink demonstrated the power of scale. Ukraine demonstrated the power of rapid adoption. The American military is attempting to build resilience through proliferation. China is accelerating its own constellations and counterspace capabilities. Europe is pursuing sovereign secure connectivity. NATO is integrating space more deeply into collective defense. No single system will control the future. But nations unable to communicate, navigate, or see from space may discover that their power on Earth has already been reduced. Churchill's Britain defended maritime routes because the entire war effort depended on what moved through them. The strategic task of this century may be to defend routes made not of water, but of data. Sea lanes defined the 20th century. Orbital networks may define the 21st. The next generation of satellite networks will not simply connect people. They will increasingly connect machines. Satellites will communicate with other satellites. Sensors will identify problems before ground controllers see them. Software will redirect data around damaged infrastructure. Artificial intelligence will help decide which signal receives priority, which route is fastest, and which satellite must move to avoid a collision. The network above us will become faster, larger, and more autonomous. That may make civilization more resilient than ever before. It may also create a system so complex and so essential that no government, company, or military can afford to misunderstand it. Today's largest constellations already contain thousands of moving spacecraft. Managing them manually in the way early satellites were controlled would be impossible. Each satellite changes position. Each experiences different traffic demands, weather conditions in space, technical failures, and potential collision warnings. Automation is therefore not an optional feature. It is the only way the system can operate at scale. In the near future, artificial intelligence may help constellations predict demand before it appears. If an earthquake damages communications across a region, software could redirect capacity toward emergency teams, hospitals, and temporary mobile networks. If a ground station loses power, traffic could move through optical links between satellites and descend through another station hundreds or thousands of kilometers away. AI could also identify failing components, adjust energy use, and calculate collision avoidance maneuvers faster than human operators. The European Space Agency is already developing automated systems to reduce false collision alerts and help operators respond more quickly. The reason is simple. The number of warnings is growing too rapidly for every decision to remain a slow manual process. But greater autonomy creates a new category of risk. What happens when an algorithm makes the wrong decision? What happens when two constellations calculate conflicting maneuvers? What happens when software designed to preserve one network increases danger for another? And what happens if the system making those decisions has been compromised? On Earth, an error in an internet routing system can disrupt websites or financial services. In orbit, an error can place physical objects moving at many kilometers per second on a dangerous path. The advantages of speed must therefore be balanced by verification, transparency, and human authority. The same tension will appear on the battlefield. Future military networks may connect reconnaissance satellites, drones, ground sensors, aircraft, and command centers into one continuously updated system. A drone may detect a vehicle. Software may compare the image with other intelligence. A satellite may relay the information to a command post. Another platform may be directed to confirm what was seen. This can shorten the time between observation and action. It can also shorten the time available to discover a mistake. An image may be misclassified. A signal may be spoofed. A civilian vehicle may resemble a military target. Data from one sensor may be accurate while another is outdated. The danger is not that machines will suddenly replace every commander. The more realistic danger is gradual dependence. People begin trusting the network because it is usually faster, usually accurate, and almost always available. Then, during the most important moment, it is not. A Churchillian strategist would value speed, but would also demand reserves, alternative channels, and the ability to operate after the system fails. Britain did not abandon human observers when radar appeared. It combined technologies, institutions, and judgment. The future will require the same discipline. Autonomous networks should strengthen human decisions, not make human responsibility disappear. Yet it would be a mistake to view the satellite revolution only through war. The same qualities that make low Earth orbit useful during conflict, wide coverage, portability, and reduced dependence on local infrastructure, make it exceptionally valuable during disaster. Earthquakes can cut fiber cables. Floods can destroy mobile towers. Wildfires can isolate communities. Hurricanes can interrupt electricity and communications across entire regions. A satellite terminal cannot rebuild a road or restore the power grid, but it can reconnect the people trying to do so. Starlink has reported emergency deployments during the Maui and Los Angeles wildfires and after earthquakes in Japan, Vanuatu, and Ecuador. Portable terminals have been powered by vehicles, batteries, and solar equipment when the electrical grid was unavailable. After a major disaster, connectivity can help rescue teams share maps, hospitals coordinate patients, local authorities publish instructions, and families confirm that they are alive. This is not merely convenience. Communication changes the speed and organization of recovery. Now imagine that capability evolving further. A future satellite network could connect ordinary mobile phones directly when terrestrial towers fail. Emergency bandwidth could be reserved automatically. Translation software could allow international rescue teams to coordinate immediately. Satellite imagery could identify blocked roads, while AI systems recommend routes for ambulances and supply vehicles. The same architecture could serve remote communities long before a disaster occurs. A school beyond the reach of fiber could access teachers and educational material from another country. A rural clinic could consult specialists in a major city. Researchers at sea or in polar regions could transmit data without waiting to return. Farmers could receive weather information and monitor equipment across areas with little terrestrial coverage. Ships already depend on satellite systems for communication, navigation, and emergency alerts. Aircraft increasingly use satellite connectivity for operational information as well as passenger service. Banks, telecommunications companies, and energy networks rely on precise timing and data moving through space-based infrastructure. The global economy is becoming space-enabled even when most people never notice it. That invisibility creates political danger. Societies often debate infrastructure only after it fails. People notice a bridge when it collapses, an electrical grid when the lights disappear, and a communications network when the screen stops responding. But by then, dependence has already been built. Governments must therefore decide what satellite connectivity actually is. Is it a commercial product? Is it critical infrastructure? Is it an emergency service? Or is it a strategic military capability? The answer is increasingly all four. This is what makes private space companies different from ordinary contractors. A company that manufactures a military vehicle delivers the product to a government. A company operating a satellite network may continue controlling the software, coverage, terminals, and access long after the contract is signed. Its engineers may make technical decisions with geopolitical consequences. Its service terms may affect operations across borders. Its launch capacity may determine how quickly national satellites can be replaced. This does not mean private companies should be removed from space. Without commercial innovation, many of today's advances would have taken far longer and cost governments far more. Reusable rockets, mass-produced satellites, commercial imagery, and portable terminals have expanded access to capabilities once reserved for a few states. The question is not whether governments should work with private companies. They already do, and they must. The question is how dependence should be governed. Critical contracts need clear obligations during emergencies. Military users require secure service agreements rather than informal promises. Nations need alternative providers, compatible terminals, and the ability to move essential traffic between networks. Companies need timely information about threats. Governments need transparency about outages, restrictions, and cyber incidents. Resilience is not distrust. It is preparation for the moment when trust alone is insufficient. International law provides part of the framework, but not every answer. The Outer Space Treaty entered into force in 1967, when satellites were rare and space activity was dominated by governments. It establishes that states are internationally responsible for their national activities in space, including those conducted by private entities. Governments must authorize and continually supervise those activities. That principle remains important. But the architects of the treaty did not live in a world where one company could operate thousands of satellites, connect millions of customers, and provide services relevant to an active battlefield. Existing law does not automatically resolve questions about commercial neutrality, service denial, cyber attacks, data access, or the moment when civilian infrastructure becomes a military objective. Nor does it solve the physical problem above us. Orbit is becoming crowded. According to the European Space Agency's 2025 Space Environment Report, surveillance networks were tracking roughly 40,000 objects in orbit, including about 11,000 active satellites. Yet the estimated number of debris fragments larger than 1 centimetre, large enough to cause catastrophic damage, exceeded 1.2 million. Near some heavily used low Earth orbits, the number of dangerous debris objects has reached the same order of magnitude as the number of active satellites. This is the hidden cost of the orbital revolution. Every new constellation must travel through an environment containing dead satellites, abandoned rocket bodies, and fragments from previous collisions, explosions, and weapons tests. Satellite operators already perform avoidance maneuvers. As traffic grows, those maneuvers will become more frequent and more dependent on automated coordination. The worst-case scenario is not one dramatic collision. It is a chain reaction. One impact creates debris. That debris strikes other objects. More fragments appear. Eventually, certain orbital regions could become too dangerous to use reliably. This possibility is known as the Kessler syndrome. It is not inevitable, and it will not suddenly trap humanity on Earth tomorrow. But it is serious enough that prevention can no longer be postponed. Satellites must be designed to leave important orbits after their missions. Rocket stages must be emptied of stored energy that could cause later explosions. Operators must share accurate positional data. Regulators need enforceable disposal standards. Some large pieces of existing debris may eventually have to be actively removed. ESA has adopted a 5-year target for new missions to vacate protected low Earth orbits after the end of operations, replacing the older 25-year standard for its activities. The logic is simple. Space may appear infinite. Useful orbit is not. Humanity is therefore approaching a choice. Satellite constellations could become one of the great public infrastructures of the century. They could keep hospitals online after earthquakes, connect isolated communities, improve maritime safety, support aircraft, protect economic activity, and provide communications when terrestrial systems fail. They could also deepen military dependence, accelerate targeting, concentrate strategic influence inside private organizations, and increase the risk of congestion or conflict in orbit. These futures are not mutually exclusive. The same network may perform both roles on the same day. It may carry a lesson to a remote classroom in the morning and military data across a battlefield that evening. Technology does not choose the purpose for which it is used. Societies do. That choice must be expressed through law, contracts, engineering standards, and political accountability, not through admiration for technology alone. The strongest future system will not be the constellation with the most satellites. It will be the system that can fail without producing catastrophe. It will combine commercial innovation with public responsibility. It will preserve human control over decisions involving life and war. It will provide alternative routes when one network disappears. And it will treat orbit as shared infrastructure rather than territory to be consumed without limit. Churchill understood that every generation faces technologies capable of changing history. His generation looked to the sky and saw aircraft, radar, and the possibility of national destruction. Our generation must look upward, but farther still. Because the next decisive struggle may begin hundreds of kilometers above the Earth, long before most people realize that anything has happened. The future may not belong only to the nation with the largest army. It may belong to the nation that can keep communicating when every other system begins to fail. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. Wars are not won only by weapons. They are won by the invisible networks that allow an entire nation to see, think, coordinate, and endure.